So JChains, welcome to the Crypto Princess channel. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Princess. Thank you so much for having me on here. I look forward to our conversation and telling my story and, seeing where it all goes.
Awesome. Now, just before we get started, JChains, if I was to meet you in high school, what kind of person were you?
I was a jock. I played football and baseball. Uh, I lifted weights. I drove cars. I don't want to say I was a meathead, but I was probably pretty close to a meathead.
A meathead. Okay, that's new for me. So just obviously some of my viewers are British. A jock is a athletic person. What's a meathead?
Same thing. Just like, it's like all you care about is sports and lifting and maybe drinking a beer. You know what I mean?
Okay, awesome. So JChains, from my understanding, you got into crypto quite early. You got into crypto in 2017. Now that was Bitcoin was going through its second bull run. Um, the low was around about $1,000 and the high of that bull run was just under $90,000. It was an epic bull run. It kind of started slow and then it just picked up momentum towards the end of the year. JChains, can you tell us, how did you discover crypto?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I had a buddy. I was living in Austin, Texas at that time, and so I had a buddy. Him and we were just doing some small stock trading stuff. We had penny stocks, whatever. We were just doing, having some fun with it. And then he had gotten word about something with crypto, and then all of a sudden, I know we shifted gears pretty fast because this thing was cooking, man. Things were moving quick. At that point, you could put a post-it note up on the wall with a bunch of ticker signs, just throw a dart, and whatever you hit, you could put money into it, and it would just rip, right? It would just go, go, go. So it was, around that time that we shifted from just some stock stuff over to crypto. And my buddy had actually gotten, I don't know, if you were around for a while, Ian Bellina, and so he had his little spreadsheet that would go around. So my buddy was getting the spreadsheet, and that was something else, man. Back in 2017, and that bull run, I remember. Uh, I was again living in Austin, and my family was up in Chicago. We were up in Chicago for the holidays, and we were supposed to come back for New Year's back down to Austin. And my buddy had booked an appointment for us at the Lamborghini dealership. And then we decided pretty much last minute, my wife and I, to stay up in Chicago for a few extra days. Everything was great. We were all having a good time, family. And then all of a sudden it's like the markets tanked and we had to cancel the Lambo appointments. And that's how 2017 ended.
Right, okay. So just very quickly, do you know what month you got into crypto? What month it was in
It
2017?
was probably like the early part of the summer, late spring, early summer, something like that.
So
I
just
like
before it went parabolic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying. It was like
Yeah.
right before things started going crazy. So you're just like, wait a second. It's like we were playing penny stocks, and you maybe 2 out of 30 of those things would hit, but all of a sudden it's just like, man, you couldn't miss. You couldn't miss with crypto, and we got hooked. And it's like it's funny how like several years into this, and I say this still the idea of what crypto did, and most people experience this is you kind of lose concept of some other things, and the memes tell that story where like I don't really want to spend $20 at the grocery store, but I certainly don't mind spending 2 grand on a
Yeah.
crypto.
I know this is only something that crypto people will understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so apart from your buddy, who else supported you and how did you learn about crypto back in 2017?
So self-taught. You watch. I remember watching, YouTube and videos and just talking to people. And Austin was kind of tech friendly. Austin was very tech friendly back then. And I'm pretty sure that we started meeting with some guys at like some of the breweries or barbecue joints, and just kind of going there and talking about crypto pretty early with some pretty good OG people in the space there. Definitely lost connection with a lot of those guys, but it was it was a different time. It's something I say in a lot of my show now, where when crypto first started, we do know it started many years before I got in, but I think still the ethos of the movement of what crypto was, right? The peer to peer, Satoshi's vision, all that kind of stuff. And as we've shifted on through the years, through my time in crypto, I've watched this thing go from the movement to the industry, because that was clear that you could see happening at the
Mhm.
Bitcoin conferences when more and more suits started showing up. And then now, lo and behold, 2025, we are basically joining the global financial ecosystem.
That's very, very true. How did your family feel about crypto at the time?
They thought I was an idiot.
Oh gosh.
Uh, yeah, even up until a couple years ago, to be perfectly honest with you, and I know, timeline will that kind of change, and you get more people into crypto as time went on and stuff. And my mom was the first adopter in my family of understanding what crypto, because she saw my passion for it. She
Mhm.
saw where it was going, and she did it maybe out of support of me, because it was just like, well, because I was always 1,000 miles away. I've lived away from my family for quite some time. So it was a way for us to bond. And, as it turns out, in 2018, the first conference I ever went to where I met BitBoy, Ben Armstrong, was the Voices of Blockchain conference in Chicago, which I happened to just be coming into town for some other reason. And she had asked, like, hey, I know you're into crypto. Would you want to come to this conference with me? I was like, yeah, that'd be fun.
Wow.
Yeah. So my mom, my brother, and I, we all just show up, and we would do this conference, and I'm sure we'll get into that point in a little bit here, but that day changed my life.
It did. It did. Just before we go on to 2018, how did your wife feel about crypto in 2017?
Uh, she she she's always supportive of me. So
Mhm.
I will say that. Absolutely supportive of what I was doing. Uh, Definitely had a lot of questions, didn't understand it. It's like, even now, maybe some things she doesn't quite understand, or some people don't quite understand about crypto, but she's always was supportive of me. But as far as, crypto, I didn't right in the beginning had no buy-in from anybody that I was related to. It was
Okay.
They're like, nah, like that's way too risky.
Okay. So just before we talk about the conference, let's just talk about 2018 as a whole. So after we had the parabolic moves in 2017,
Mhm.
we slid into a bear market because we had recessionary concerns, and also ICOs were the hype of the 2017 bull run. And then the SEC stepped in and started to issue Wells notices to cryptocurrency projects and exchanges, etc. Were you aware at the time that there was a difference between a bull market and a bear market?
Yeah, so it was a baptism by fire for me, to be honest with you. So I had told you a little bit about, and some people know kind of my origin story in crypto and how it all works. And I told you, I got the understanding of what crypto was because of my buddy in stock trading and all that stuff. But ultimately, when you talk about bear markets, and I think what bear markets are really good for is sediment, keeping people active, engaged, all that stuff. And so I had probably in the early part of 2018 become a community member for, it's now a defunct exchange. It was called CoinPulse. But at that point, I was just a community member. I was invested. I really liked the team members. They were active and fun, and some of the other people in the community. And so they started doing like these fan art competitions, right? And when that started happening, I was just like, oh, this is cool. This is really fun engagement. It keeps people interested when the times are tough, right? And and basically, I was winning all of those, and all of a sudden fast tracked up to, let's do some video submissions, right? And then started winning those. And then it became, hey, why don't you just host a YouTube channel for us? And so in the background of all of this, I was also on the listing team, right? And so when you talk about like kind of getting an understanding of crypto and all that, baptism by fire, like for sure, not only am I having to go on camera and talk about these projects, but I am learning, reading white papers, doing all this stuff for several hours a day. So I just get this massive knowledge of everything, protocols at that point, and everything that was happening. And so it was very cool to take this idea of, oh man, like we're not getting rich anymore, but we're making friends, we're in this community, and now it's like, wait a second. So I went to college for broadcast communications. I was on the radio at my college. That's what I wanted to be. And so now it's like, wait a second, I can actually do something extremely similar to what I've always
Mhm.
wanted to do. But, instead of just with a microphone, it's a camera and a microphone. It's like, wait a second, I love this. I absolutely love this. And so it was one of those, it turned into very fast for me. You turn your passion, and I speak about this all the time. And it's, the number one question I get is like, how do you do what you do? Or you just start, right? But you got to
Mhm.
have a passion for it, and you turn that passion into something that can make you a profit. And they're cliche sayings, right? If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I feel like it's a grind. What we do is a grind, but I never actually, and you can get burnt out and all that stuff, but I never get tired of talking crypto. I never get tired of talking to people in crypto, and it's a special place. And it's interesting, right? Because when you think about most, if you think about the normal financial world, most people don't get excited to hop on camera and start talking about the dollar. Like that's just weird. But because it's a new industry and everything's being built up right now, I think maybe that's why there's a little bit more excitement to it. So I hope that answered your question.
No, it does, because you also met somebody who who you partnered up with at the Bitcoin at one of the conferences in 2018. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So as it turns out, my mom and myself we're gonna get there a little bit before my brother. So we walk in to the conference, we walk around just for a second, and then we were gonna go over to the bar area and get, I don't know, probably a beer or something and just kind of sit there and hang out and wait for my brother to show up. And all of a sudden there's this crazy loud commotion of this guy screaming about his stickers. And it just so happens that it's Ben Armstrong, his BitBoy, and he had at this point his I think it was his father-in-law he still does, has a printing company, and so he had made all these stickers for Ben to give out, promote his brand and everything, but the bag had gone missing. And so, I walk up to him and be like, hey, what's going on, man? And tells me the story and all that stuff. And I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was at this point. It was still pretty early. His channel was small. I think the channel that I had been running for that exchange was larger than what he had at this point. um and so we started shooting the breeze, and we talked. The conference was of course over the course of 2 days, and so we intermittently talked back and forth. And I got invited to some of the influencer parties. That's where I also met Wendy O. Was that year, and a couple other people that are in the space still. And it was really interesting, and so we really bonded. It was funny. The one thing that bonded us together was at that point, when we did our videos, we were always dressed from the top up, right? We'd always have on, your shirt, whatever, but you might just be sitting in your boxer shorts because you're at home and it doesn't matter and all that stuff. And so this is a thing that we were both, kind of laughing about and talking about at that point. We bonded over that and jokingly said, hey, let's start a podcast. And no shit, 2 weeks later, we had started shooting our first episodes of what was the Beards and Bitcoins podcast. And we did that for a while. Got some really big guests on there. I actually got a chance to develop a relationship with John McAfee. Got to talk to him several times throughout that, and we were actually cell phone buddies. John and I were. So we exchanged text messages back and forth every now and then. Was supposed to go. So there was a couple back in the early days of crypto Twitter, Euclid and Oaks, and they were. It was going to be them, and then me and Ben. We were going to go down to. At that point, he was in the Outer Banks, and then getting ready to go to the Caribbean. And then it was just things happened too fast, and so we never got a chance to get down there. But we were supposed to go down there and interview him on the boat. But you know, that's
So the reason why you started the podcast is because you thought it was going to be fun working with Ben. You thought he was a lively person.
yeah. So back in the days, things were obviously personalities were a lot different back there. Back then, and you people didn't have the cloud or whatever to that point that the person that we know now. And so yeah, we bonded over simply again the style of how we shot videos, and we had always prided ourselves, and that was like the theme of the show and our mantra, and we said it on every episode that we were just two regular dudes. You know what I mean? Like most people in crypto at that point were extremely nerdy. It was very hard to find normal people. And so that was something that, we bonded over. It's just like, we're just regular guys that happen to be in this space, that we understand what's happening here. And so our tagline was, we're a crypto podcast for the man's man and the ladies who love him, meaning the ladies who just love normal guys. You know what I mean? Like, we just wanted to appeal to normal people. And that was really what put us together at that point, is we were just two guys that, thought it would be good to do a podcast. We had good camera presence. We had, a good understanding, and it was good for what it was. I mean, I think we definitely undervalued for the time, but it is what it is.
So tell me about it. So for somebody who hasn't, say for example, somebody's watching this and they haven't seen an episode, tell me what an episode looks like, where you shot it, and what went into planning your episodes.
So way back then, man, we did probably did them over Zoom. So it was just a standard side by side. And this is really interesting. So I'll come back to all this stuff. This is one of the things that I love about, and from what I understand about starting a YouTube channel. And another thing that I love to answer for people is, don't have like the, a lot of people get the analysis paralysis, where everything has to be extremely perfect before you can get started, right? And so think about that, where, back in those days, we were just shooting with Zoom on probably 480 or for whatever the, that quality is. And so it was grainy, the backdrops were terrible, all that stuff. And so the audience, as you first start and grow, the audience comes to find that as your set changes, as your setup gets better, as you grow and better your show, they come along for the ride. And I think that helps build a different style audience of people who are loyal to you, who, stick through you through bear markets, bull markets, all that kind of stuff, especially in this space. That's what I know for, crypto. Other industries, I don't know, if they have bear and bull markets, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
So how did you actually plan an episode? Because were you in the same area?
No. So he was in the Georgia area here where I am now, and I was living in Austin. So we would just hop on a call, whether it was on the phone or we'd do a shared Zoom. I think everything was Zoom. I don't know if we did Skype. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was just Zoom back then, and we would just talk about what it was going to be. Or this episode, Ben specifically had some information that he wanted to talk about, or if I something that I wanted to bring up. It was really kind of situational. And if my memory serves me correct, yeah, it was it was a lot of news and things that were happening at that particular time. So it was all current event based.
Sounds like you guys had a really good relationship and a really good setup back then. If we talk about 2019 and 2020 together, so we're talking about round about the time that the pandemic hit, or just before the time the pandemic hit. In 2020, especially March 2020, we had that major COVID dip as well. That was a really difficult time for the crypto community. People were dying everywhere. Businesses were closing. People were losing their jobs. Nobody knew what was happening. Some people thought it was the end of the world, as we know it. Tell me about your experience at this time. What were you doing?
Yeah. So, back to, the company that we were running, the group and event transportation business, we had been extremely successful with what we were doing at that point. The NCAA, who carries they are the collegiate athletics. It's, the National Collegiate Athletics Association, for all the college sports through Division 1, 2, and 3, men's and women's and all that stuff. And so we had them as a client. When the Pope came to Philadelphia in 2015, we did the charter bus intake for every charter bus in the country, that because you had to come into a specific perimeter and all that stuff. So like, we played at the highest level in what we were doing. But unfortunately, with the pandemic, people stopped traveling like that. They stopped traveling in groups. And so, our business ended up, going like most companies did, small businesses at that point. You're just kind of forced to shut it down. And so, thankfully, and I say thankfully for my sake and my family, is that, I was doing this in the background. I was doing these videos. I had built these relationships. And so at that point, Ben was actually coming out to Austin. We had booked a studio, like a podcast studio, where we would go and we would record a month, worth of episodes of like some evergreen content, and then we would do, the back and forth stuff on Zoom or whatever, to put in some supplemental stuff. But after a while, this is, shortly thereafter, I got to really start do this full time, and then his channel was starting to get very, very successful. And at that point, the whole idea of, instead of Ben coming to Austin, is why don't I come to Georgia? So for a good while, and this is while my wife was pregnant too. So put some strain on what we were doing, but it's how we made it all work, right? Is I would fly here to Atlanta for a week, stay here, film and try to film in excess and do what we could to have filler film for the following week, and then fly back to Austin. And so going back and forth, and that we did that for a good while. I mean, that took us through most of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And then into 2021 is when, the whole idea of, hey, just come out here, just move to Atlanta. And so, the all of that was facilitated. We had just built a house in Austin, and we had sold that and timed the market actually pretty well there at that point, and then came out here. And at that point, I thought it was the right decision.
Okay. So in 2020, you were leaving your pregnant wife for a week. Bless her. That must have been really difficult for both of you. But it kind of shows that you guys had a really good relationship. He wanted to keep you close to him. He wanted to, BitBoy wanted to make content with you, and your relationship was quite solid.
Mhm.
Um, Tell me about the move from Austin to, is it Georgia?
Georgia, yeah, Northwest Georgia.
Yeah.
It was good. I mean, ultimately, it was a little bit different. Austin is a little bit different of a city, than where I happen to live now. A little bit different of a pace, but at the end of the day, I do love being here. I love where I live. It's, proximity wise, I'm close to the mountains. I'm close to the ocean. I'm close to some other places. Whereas, like, so I drive a lot. My family like to get in the car and go on road trips and everything. And so, like, when you live in Central Texas, when you live in Austin, you are in the car for 5-6 hours, and guess what? You're still in Texas. You know what I mean? So whereas now here again, you're an hour up north, you're in the mountains, a couple hours out east, and you're at the ocean. A couple hours, you're down to Florida. So like proximity wise, we can do a lot of different things here. So I welcomed the move. We did, when you say, we talked about my wife and me leaving, on the weeks and all that stuff. Thankfully, and I would say this is probably what made it happen and work, is that we had a couple really, really, really good friends. One of her like friends for decades had moved to Austin, and so she had a really good support system. Plus, it was just crazy. This neighborhood that we had built our house in, on our street, probably 6 other women that were pregnant that were due, in very similar time, and so it was this community that all came together and really supported each other. So that, like, if we didn't have that, I don't know if I would have been able to actually leave for a week at a time, because that's a lot, right? To leave a pregnant woman. And
Yeah.
I know that, but that's what I needed to do in order to keep the machine rolling.
Right. Okay. So when you went to Georgia, BitBoy, but Ben Armstrong was probably by that time, you guys were probably, I don't know, best friends or something. Very, very close.
I was on Team BitBoy. There were, jokes about all that kind of stuff, but Ben and I had moved for really, for anybody else in that building, and I have actually made some good relationships with a lot of those guys. So don't get me wrong on any of that. And it all started because of my relationship with Ben. So at the end of the day, I was Team Ben because he was the reason why I was there. It was him and I's relationship, which is what catapulted and precipitated, me even coming out to Georgia in the first place. It wasn't anybody else. But, ultimately at the end of the day, again, you come to meet new people, and you learn and grow. And, I have no problems with anybody over there at this point.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so that was 2021. Now we did have obviously we had the bull run. So in 2021 we started off, almost vertically. We hit the first peak at 64,000 US dollars. Then the China FUD hit. Bitcoin dropped 50% basically. It ranged for, around 30,000 for a good couple of months. Bitcoins were taken off the exchanges because of the supply shock. That led to the second peak, and we peaked out at 69,000 US dollars in the November. That was a very difficult bull run, living through it. In hindsight, everything seems more clear. How did you navigate that bull run yourself? And then bearing in mind, you had a massive audience that was listening to you.
Yeah, well, we were all crushing it. I was crushing the bull run. Unfortunately, one of my stories that I tell is, we were doing a lot of leverage trading at that point, and it's just you couldn't lose, right? When things are right in the market, like, and you win big. I remember I took a flight to Las Vegas once from here, and it was just like crazy. Like, I'd gotten in a trade at the airport, and then for whatever reason, my flight didn't have Wi-Fi. And I was like, oh man, all right, well, I'll just keep it in. And when I got to Vegas, like, I was up 30 G's. I was like, oh, okay, like, this is cool. And so, you really kind of get some confidence, maybe not the right confidence, to be honest with you. And as it turns out, as most people know my story, I had gotten into where it was a dip that kept dipping and kept dipping. I'd gotten liquidated I leverage traded and revenge traded through 5 liquidations, and I burnt through, I think the number was about $140,000, and that wiped me out for the bull run. One day. Did it in one day.
This is the thing. It's a lot of people, especially newbies, need to understand that there's a lot of psychology that goes into the markets. For example, when everything is going up, traders tend to, and this is across the board, this is like people who have been trading for 30 years. They everybody kind of lowers their risk assessment, eases off a little bit. And that's why you'll see that traders often have their worst performing year after their best performing year. And the same with investors. Investors become moon boys when everything is going up and they don't take profits. So when the bear market hits, they, round trip their bags. So how did you deal with that loss? Because that's a massive loss.
Just get to work. You know what I mean? Just keep trying to earn money and build and grow and learn the craft and get better at trading. And, you refine your strategy where you don't guess, you react to the market. You become a trader, not a speculator or a guesser or a gambler. So it's that, to me, was one of my biggest changes between the last bull run and where we're at right now. Is I have the ability to wait a day or two to get into a trade because I know what happens if I jump in early. I get wrecked every time. I set my lines, I set my alarms, I wait for them to go off, and I don't just hop into a trade, I watch. And if it starts to go down more, which inevitably it does, it's one of those things. We all hear it, and it's cliche, but it's true, right? Where you put in your order. Let's just use some round numbers, right? You want to put in an order at $1, right? And so with your leverage that you got on your liquidation is 75 cents. Well, you know what you should do? You should just put in your order at 78 cents. You know why? Because it's going to go down there because you're going to get liquidated if you don't put in a stop loss. Right? So,
Okay. What else happened in 2021? I understand you had a falling out.
mhm. That was a falling out the first time with Ben, and some people know some details, most people don't, and I think it done by design that way. So.
Okay. Do you want to go into the falling out?
No, I
Okay.
think people understand, especially after this most recent one. People kind of understand maybe what happened. So.
Okay. So after 2021, we slid into a bear market. Now, in bear markets, even fundamentally strong projects can go to zero. We had many projects, many black swan events. So we had Luna, we had 3 Hours Capital, FTX, Voyager, etc., one after the other. Were you still on YouTube in the bear market, and how did you navigate
Yeah.
2022?
I love that. This is one of my favorite, and I had said earlier in the interview about like what bear markets are good for. They're good for keeping the sentiment. They're good for keeping people together, right? And so at this point, I had gone on my own, and the first show that I had created at that point was called Web3 Breakfast, and I still run it to this day. And it's a morning show. I like to say it's a show for the community by the community, right? It's everybody has an opportunity to come up. You can raise your hand and come up to the stage. We only ask that people are just respectful, right? That's the only rule that I would ever have. Is just be respectful. And at that point, because we were going through a bear market, there were, some people that were on, they were community members of the channel that I was running when I was with Hit Network. And obviously, when I left, I had to abandon my channel, Meta Money. At that point, it was a metaverse focused channel, a little ahead of its time, but nonetheless, we did some great work. We talked about some great projects. Probably should have been more Web3 gaming focused, but that wasn't the narrative. Metaverse was the narrative at that time.
Mhm.
And so I did take a bunch of my community members, and they came with me, obviously, because they like my style. They like that I'm a human, and I don't talk down to people. I don't think that I'm smarter than people. I'm just really good to get along with. I am everybody's friend, and I think that's a good thing. It's also kind of gotten me into some trouble at some points because you've got to be controversial. This is an attention economy, right? You can't be plain Jane, because what's the point? You got to have some spice to you. So, that being said, it was important for me to start that Web3 breakfast, because that's where I got to keep a lot of my community members, and we got to stay together, and we would chat every morning, and we would laugh, and it was a great way to just start your day. And it wasn't, and I had gone through a few things where I tried to make it something maybe more than what it was, or tried to bring in too much educational value, or too much, right? And at 9 a.m., for me, like, it's still, it's early, but it's fine. But a lot of my audience was over on the West Coast in California, so at like 6 a.m., you're trying to teach concepts, and nobody wants to hear that. And so, we went through some iterations, and we kind of just scaled it back. And so it was a morning dose of degen, right? And it was a great way for all of us to stay together throughout the bear market, stay happy. We would talk about other things like NFTs and community, and just we'd find ways to keep ourselves engaged and happy through arguably one of the worst bear markets that, if you've been through, the 2018, 19, and then, you come to this one, 2022, like,
Yes. It was a very difficult bear market. I was actually born in the bear market, born in the bear. How did your wife feel about you going solo?
uh at that point, so it had been a couple of years, so it was the natural step. Again, we had, at that point, the house we were living in, I had probably the largest room in the house set up as my studio, so it was good. We were all at home. We had just had a baby. My daughter was born in the fall of 2021, so we were cruising, we were rocking and rolling. I was doing my thing. We were, money was not free flowing, but I was doing okay. We had some crypto at that point, and I was getting a check, and everything was fine. But then, you know, the bull market came back. Well,
It started. So we have a 4-year cycle in crypto. We have traditionally 1 year of downwards action and 3 years of increase in the price of Bitcoin. So 2023.
mhm.
Okay, so sorry, going back to 2022, we hit the bottom of the bear market in November 2022 when Bitcoin fell to around about the 15,000 US dollars. At the time, were you aware that that was the bottom, and were you buying?
Always buying. Well, maybe was tapped out of buying the dip, but at that point, like, I mean, I was an analyst. I was looking at charts every day. I was looking at headlines, looking at Coin Market Cap or Coin Gecko every day. So at that point, I mean, you always try to guess when the bottom is. You're never gonna accurately guess the
Mhm.
bottom. It's not about timing the market, it's time in the market, as they say. And so, just, being full-time crypto, you're a little bit more plugged in the know than, most people, because most people don't spend all day looking at charts and numbers and headlines and preparing for shows and all that kind of stuff like, we do.
Mhm. Awesome. So you're both an investor and a trader, aren't you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what sort of trading do you do? Is that day trading?
Yeah, right now I'm playing with a new indicator. It's the leapfrog indicator. It's a VWAP strategy, and so I'm actually doing a lot more scalping right now.
Okay.
Just some like, short time frames, looking for things to go from a previous to a daily VWAP or vice versa. So I'm more of a long trader. I hate shorting, especially right now, because the flip could happen at any moment. And so the upside is better. If you get caught in the long, oh well, you know what I mean? If you get caught in a short, you can get smoked out if things pump.
Okay. So just for those who are not aware, a scalper will put in dozens, if not hundreds of trades a day. And what they're looking for is tiny, tiny movements and just getting those movements. So it's more about not making an individual massive move, but throughout the day, etc. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of focus. Scalping does. Okay, let's talk about 2023. We've come out of the bear market now. We're starting to go up. How
Mhm.
was your channel doing in 2023? Let's go to 2023 and 2024.
Mhm. So the 2023 throughout most of the year, things were fine. Like I've never really experienced too much major growth in the channel. I think to this point, I think I've got 2,600 viewer or subscribers on my channel. But within the last several months, I've seen a lot more growth. I wasn't really putting a whole lot of time in it, to be honest with you. So with the Web3 Breakfast show as a space, my goal was to nail that. And I tried doing in the beginning, and I still do this now because one of my friends had said, man, you should be streaming, you should be creating content on all the stuff you're doing. And so my thing was I wanted to do the space because I wanted to be community focused. And so anybody could interact and they could, be on the show and do all that stuff. But then I needed to start live streaming it so that I could create the content, but in perfect transparency. Like literally, in the early days, I kept a YouTube channel around so that my mom could watch it because she doesn't use X or
Oh,
Twitter at that point, but she could use YouTube. And so I literally kept my YouTube channel up just so that my mom could watch. And ultimately, other people were watching and stuff, but I didn't care. I wasn't worried about YouTube. I was just more worried about X, growing on X, and growing my community on the Web3 Breakfast. So,
okay, awesome. Let's talk about last year.
mhm.
So last year, 2024, it was a good year for Bitcoin. We went from I don't know about 100 from about 37,000 US dollars, something similar to that. We made a new all-time high of 108,000 US dollars. We had a lot of institutional investors coming into the market because of the ETFs. Legitimacy was added into the market with Trump running on Bitcoin. Germany sold their Bitcoin for some reason. I'm pretty sure they would regret that now. We had an alt season in quarter 1, a little alt season in quarter 4. We had an extended meme season. What was 2024 like for you?
2024 was it was a good year for me. So kind of to back up towards the tail end of 2023 is
Mhm.
when I had got back together with Ben and AJ, and the three of us
Okay.
we started working together again. So at that point, Ben had been completely outed from his company, and so he went off on his own to start his own thing. And AJ and I went and worked with him. I had packed up my entire home studio, and I brought every bit of gear that I had to help him start his show back at that point. Because at the end of the day, like, yeah, we had a falling out, but boys will be boys. Like dudes are dudes. Like, so be it. Whatever happened happened. At the end of the day, like tempers flared up, and we could get over it because we're men. And at that point, we said, all right, cool, let's do this. And so him, AJ, and I, and then at that point it was Cassie, and then he brought on his assistant Ashley. It was us, and we went from one studio to ultimately the one that we stayed in for most of 2024, where we were up until part of 2025. But 2024 was a great year. I was back in a studio with other people. We were living it. We were doing the things and doing shows, talking to smart people, all that stuff. 2024 was a great year, and I think a lot of people really experienced not only me, but a lot of people in crypto experienced, the joys of maybe their first taste of what an altcoin season was. Because if you look at a chart, if you honestly, because two things that we need right now to happen. I know we're not talking about the market. We're going to jump back there, but two things we need right now is Bitcoin dominance to slam down. The price doesn't need to go down, but dominance needs to go down. And the others chart, which is all the altcoins that are outside of the top 10. So no Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, USDT, USDC, stuff like that. We need the others chart to shoot up. So in November, we saw a little bit of this, right? And so November, some people got a taste of what potentially was like their first altcoin season where, Bitcoin dominance needs to drop like 40 some percent. We've seen that happen two times for sure, three times where it gets up to 70% and then drops. And so I think that's what we're going to itch to. And once we see dominance drop and altcoins rip, man, oh man, if you thought November was good, it's going to be fun.
We're all looking forward to that. Let's go back to you, AJ, and BitBoy.
Mhm.
So because BitBoy was technically the largest crypto personality in the world on YouTube, perhaps not in the world. I'd say Michael Saylor's probably bigger.
Well, as far as YouTubers go, he was the first to 1 million, and then some other people passed him, and the story is the story there. But he was the first crypto specific YouTuber to hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
So once he built up his company, Hit Network, and then obviously he had a falling out with his co-workers or co-founders or whoever it was there.
Mm.
He came straight back to you and built another company.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So he started his own company, but I was just there to help him, press the buttons on the cameras, press the buttons on and I should have been probably better at the self promotion stuff, but I was, I've always been the selfless guy where I was just like, dude, let me help you out. Let me, I know that for his personality and what he was doing, like for him to just sit down in a chair and do a live stream that's not Ben, that's not his personality. He needed to stand up and he needed to be lively and all that. So in order to do that, you need someone else to run the board and the buttons for him. So I said, hey man, I know what you need. I know how to do it. Let's get to work. And so it was an understanding that, the past was the past. Who cares? Like, again, like I said, we're men. We moved past that. And so it was, hey, let's do this. And I probably should have helped promote myself a little bit more, but that was one of the lessons that I had learned from AJ throughout all of this is that, I need to be a little bit more selfish about myself. And so that's what I'm doing this year. So when we get to 2025, that's what we'll talk about, is me being selfish this year.
How did your community and your wife feel about you going back to that setup?
Confused. I will not lie to you about that at all. There were some people left my community. Some people said, "What are you doing?" Throughout all of that, throughout all the time of working back with Ben, I lost people in my community. I did gain some people, but I did lose some people that, had been around for a while. They didn't think that was the right move. My wife, perfect transparency, she was questioning as well. I mean, at the time, when we left, it was not a good situation. But again, I was able to see past that and say, we can move past that for the sake of greater good. And I ended up thinking that, we going back to work with Ben would have been a better situation than it was. And hindsight's always 2020, if you understand what I'm saying.
So that was 2024. Let's talk about this year. Now, before we get into everything else that you're doing, what happened with you and Ben?
Really quick, two things about 2024.
Sorry, carry on.
My first professional MMA fight, I fought for Karate Combat in May in Austin. And then in December, I did a professional boxing match for CFN in Dubai. So those were two amazing. When I told you I had a great 2024, I had a great 2024. It was experiences. Life was kind of better than it had been. That
Let's
that
talk about those because that's actually quite big. Karate combat is really, really big. So for anyone in the crypto space, that's where crypto YouTubers and influencers get together and they have like these little matches, and it's so interesting and so nice to watch.
Mhm.
Tell me, how did you prepare for your match, and who was your opponent, and how did the fight go?
Good. I'm glad you asked that. So, this to me is now one of the most important things that's ever happened in my life. So I went from fat to fit in the pit in like 45 days. Right. I had not a whole lot of time. I was a last minute fill in. I fought Billy McFarland, who was the scammer of the Fire Fest. Some people know, some people don't. You can look it up. There's a documentary on Netflix if you want to check it out. Uh,
Oh,
so I agreed to it, and Billy was 6'3". I'm 6 foot in the morning, 5'11" at night. And so I was out height. I was outmatched. Plus, I ran out of gas. It was my first fight. I was green. I didn't know anything. So I learned a lot. But the most important thing that I learned throughout all of this, and this is what I tell people, is that I learned who I was as a man, right? I had to challenge myself. I had to dig down and really make myself uncomfortable in order to get myself into a place where I had to be, right? And not only that, I thank the support of my family, right? My wife and daughter, because I had, all of a sudden, it was my April 30th of 2024 was my birthday. I turned 42. That was like a Saturday or Friday, whatever it was. The next Monday, and I had signed my contract over the weekend. That next Monday at like 8 in the morning, I was at a boxing coach, and so I had a boxing coach in the morning, and then it was either go straight home and do the show, or go to the gym and do a double session, and maybe sometimes even a third session in the afternoon. So it really taught me who I was and that I'm capable of so much more than I ever thought that I was. And I like to tell people, like, anybody is capable of that. You just have to want it, and you just have to dig down and get it, because it is there.
so what was the fight actually like?
It was the coolest experience I have ever had in my life. I've been on stage. I've been on stage in front of thousands of people. I've ridden motorcycles. I've driven cars extremely fast. I have a high octane lifestyle, high adrenaline. You go big or go home kind of thing. The adrenaline that I experienced on the walkout it's nothing I've ever experienced before. I probably will never get to experience that again, but it's okay. I know how it feels inside. And after all of this is happening, like right as I walk out of the tunnel, the lights are flashing, people are screaming. I see my wife and my daughter, and I have like this like Simba Mufasa moment where I just like grab her, I lift her up and give her a kiss and like give her back to my wife. You know what I mean? And it's just like it was to me. It's just like this is my moment. This was my moment. Everybody there, and I was the favorite, and I screwed it up. Like I should have fought better, but it's okay. It was lesson learned. But that was my moment. And I was always a team athlete growing up. I told you I was a meathead. I was a jock. I played football and baseball. And so you're a team athlete at that point. This is the first thing that I ever had to do for myself. And that was my moment. And I freaking loved it. I loved it.
Okay, awesome. Now tell me about the boxing match.
That was so cool. So that was with CFN, Crypto Fight Night in Dubai, which I really like the boxing. I think, that's a gentleman's sport. It's not as much. Again, I'm not a spring chicken. If I'll be 43 in a couple days, like, those MMA things take a lot out of me, but the boxing was good. And so I got a chance to fight actually for a WBA title. I ended up losing to Eric Grimace. He was undefeated. It was his title to win. It was mine to take away. And I almost had him. I had him standing out a few times, but again, fight experience. My fight IQ is much better now. But it was, my first chance I got to go to Dubai. I got to take my wife and daughter with me. So we spent a whole week checking out Dubai, experiencing that culture. And I absolutely love it, love it, love it. That to me and that was early December. So that was such a cool family moment was to just go out there and experience Dubai. And that same moment, like, it was a little bit different. It wasn't as grand, at my karate combat fight. Joe Rogan was there. Shane Gillis was there. There was a bunch of celebrities there. At the boxing match, it was, this was my second one, so I kind of had some more expectations. It was a really cool setup. I was in a whole new place of the world. It's just so cool. And if anybody has a platform and you have the opportunity, it's not for everybody, but if you think that you can handle that, men or women, I would say sign up for it, because the greatest experience I've ever had in my life, outside of the birth of my daughter and the marriage of my wife.
Obviously. We have to put that in there. Oh my god, you're so passionate about it. I would be surprised if we don't see fight number 3 at some point.
I know. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know the details. I have been in talks, hopefully to maybe get something in Vegas during the Bitcoin conference. So strategically, that would be good. You know what I
I'll
mean?
be in Vegas. I'll be there. I'll be
Nice.
cheering you on.
Nice.
Awesome. Okay, let's go to so that was 2024, 2025. So I think it was at the beginning of 2025. What happened um with you and Ben Armstrong?
So he was going through his his court stuff. He was going through his divorce. He was going through his court stuff with the company and all that stuff. And it had been several years and it was driving him crazy. And as it turns out, he was kind of losing control of what maybe reality was in the situation and what was important. We were going through a bull run. He was, and to I understand, if someone were to kind of lose the empire that he had, it would maybe, you'd drive you to want to get it back, or maybe fixate on it a little too much. But, we were going through a bull run. And, when you think about what we all did and what we went through, you see AJ, and I tell you, 2025 is a year for me to be selfish. That's kind of what I saw AJ, and he's talked about this too. It's like, he did that, and that ultimately got him to being the success where he's at right now, is that he wasn't listening to the noise. He wasn't paying attention to that. That wasn't a part of the thing. Whereas, I was out there every day pressing the buttons, doing the camera and all that stuff. So I had to live that. And it was a little much. And ultimately, and what I will say about all of this was, it got to the point where instead of just talking about it, it was on the show every day. And then I had said, listen, I don't want any part of this. Like, this is your life. This is your situation. I feel for you. I understand that. I know this is tough, but it's not mine, and I don't want to be a part of it. Like, I don't want to have to like comment on it. Like, I don't want to. So just don't bring this stuff up on the stream. And he snuck attack something in there. It was like, reading AJ's affidavit, and he was trying to ask me questions. And like, after the show, I was very displeased with him, and that was the last time him and I had ever talked civilly. It didn't start out civilly, the conversation, but ultimately by the end of it, we had an understanding of where things were, but that was it. Um, and we all know what had happened to them, and he just became too fixated on that whole situation with the case, and then ultimately, he said that he was taking Adderall. Unfortunately, it is what it is. His brain became sick. He's all self aware of all the stuff. He said it all. He was a meth head in a former life, and when you are a meth head and you abuse Adderall, which is basically the same thing,
Mhm.
it's not a good thing. And so, unfortunately, that's where all that went down. And he made some really bad choices. He pissed off a lot of people, and hopefully, for his sake, he he gets back to where he needs to be. But as far as like a relationship with him and I got nothing nice to say to him.
How does your wife and your community feel about this?
Same, nothing nice to say to him. He attacked. Not only did he attack me, he attacked my wife. He said some things about my daughter, which that's off limits. Like, you don't do that. Like, if you want to talk shit about me, okay, I don't care. I got really thick skin, but you don't bring families into this. And so, again, that was not good. My community did not like that. He attacked people in my community. So it wasn't a good situation. It was actually very rough. It was a very dark period for a couple weeks where it was nonstop.
So he was doing this public.
And yeah, oh, yeah, public and private. And the stuff in the text messages was some of the nastiest stuff you've ever heard in your life.
So if he's talking about it publicly, how did his community react to him talking a certain way about you?
I
Did you
think
get any backlash?
yeah, well, I mean, look what happened. People stopped going to his show. It was people, you look at the comments on his posts, everybody knew that it was there was no validity to any of it. Like I I'm a good human being. Like, I spend my waking moments either working and grinding or spending time with my family. Like, to think anything otherwise, or to think that, like he was saying stuff also, like, I was a criminal mastermind, that, we talk about the voices of block. I was telling you, my mom invited me to this conference back in Chicago. But part of his delusion was, this was a setup from the beginning, that I was brought in there to infiltrate his life, to take over his company. It's like,
Oh my God.
it got strange. It really did get
Yeah.
strange. But at the end of the day, it's my time. I spent a lot of time helping other people make money and become something, but this is my time, and so that's what the rest of 2025. So flash forward to April of 2025. I turned 43 in a couple days, and this is my year to make it happen for me and my community, and that's it. That's my come up time.
Okay. I understand that there's probably some things that you don't want to talk about regarding that, because I do know that some people came after you, and it was actually a lot worse than what you're actually saying now. But that's fine.
You can ask. You feel free to ask. I'll either deflect it or I'll answer. You can.
Okay. Some of your supporters came after you, didn't they?
Yeah.
What happened?
Blocked a lot. Blocked a lot of those comments. I'd have conversations with my wife, and I would call those people the mouth breathers. And so, you really, when you're in this industry, when you're in the attention economy, when you have a public face on a video, you have to get really used to people saying mean things to you. And so I did, right? And so the comments, about me, while they kind of got, it was a lot at once, is really what it was. Um, it really took a toll, and probably more than it normally would, where my method of, like, I don't respond back. Again, I'll either, if it's bad enough, I'll block people. But what I
Mhm.
do is I fire off exactly what I would say, like, without holding anything back, just to get the catharsis of typing it out there, and then delete it. Um, but that's how I would deal with stuff like that. And then I would just, if it was like something was bad, like, I would, like, ask my wife, like, just don't look at this particular thread.
What were some of the threats?
What's that?
What were some of the threats?
Threats? um, let's just say wiping out your bloodline.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have literally nothing nice to say about Ben Armstrong. And
And your wife, she was very scared, wasn't she?
yeah, we were. Thankfully, so as it turns out, I have a lot of people in my corner, and I have a lot of people who are looking out for me. And shortly after, things were getting really bad, I was getting messages from people letting me know of locations where he was, so that we didn't have to live in fear. Because that was one of our biggest fears, was in Unhinged. And like, with someone like that, with, if you've got someone who is he's got a violent past when he's on drugs. So you don't know what kind of person you're dealing with. And so if Ben Armstrong came back here as a meth head, that's the person that you need to be afraid of. Ben Armstrong as a person is a coward. And that's why he acts the way he does. But if he's on drugs, he's that's when he's dangerous.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, let's move over. Let's move forward. Let's leave that behind. So we've left that. We'll leave that as it is. Tell me about 2025.
I mean, it's just getting started. The first couple months were extremely challenging. Extremely challenging. Um, yeah, the first quarter of this year was for, especially me as a content creator, as a YouTuber, as a podcaster, as a public figure, whatever, however you want to classify it, KOL. This was, mentally speaking, the hardest period that I've ever had to deal with. But since we've kind of come to grips with it, and have moved forward over the last several weeks. And now with the understanding that we've got, a little bit more safety within, any kind of interactions or whatever. Um, I feel much better. Like it took a little while to come to some of the peace from that. Um, but I will tell you, I am, and I have a tattoo that says always half full. Always have fun. I'm the eternal optimist. Like I'm the person that probably annoys the shit out of most people because like I will find the silver lining in the worst situations. But that's to me, that's how you got to live. Like you can't let the bad thoughts win. And so if you let the good thoughts win always, then that just becomes, the way that you think about stuff. And so um
Hmm. So what's next for you?
well, reinvent myself to come out as the person who I am, who I'm always supposed to be. I was born with a microphone in my hand. I was born with the charisma or riz, as people would say. I've had a lot of people tell me that recently, and so my goal for this year is come out of my shell and really, again, like I said, reinvent myself. And so I'm making a huge focus to have a local presence here in Georgia. So not only tonight is my first crypto pizza meetup. It's going to be the last Friday of every month. But last night, I did speak on a panel at the Atlanta Blockchain Center, and I'm going to start collaborating with them a lot more and more. And we've got the Pizza DAO Bitcoin Pizza Party that is a global thing happening on May 22nd. So I'm sure no matter where you guys are listening, there is a pizza party happening. And if there's not, join up with the Pizza DAO because they will make sure that there is one and you could be the host of it. And it's really cool. It's a really cool concept. And so that's May 22nd. And then in June, I'm actually hosting all of the guests that I've got 15 tickets. So I'm going to be hosting everybody for a fun little get together at the UFC fight on behalf of VChain here in Georgia. So
Awesome. That's a lot to look forward to.
yeah, yeah. So it's really a lot of getting myself out there and doing the things that I should have been doing all along. I should have been helping build a presence for me personally here in Georgia, but also Georgia, making Georgia a hub for blockchain and crypto, I think is really important. A lot of the places that we go to here in the States are kind of played out or not accessible to everybody else. I mean, Miami's great. Everybody loves having a great time in Miami, but when all the events and everything's on Miami Beach, not everybody can afford that. And then, so if you stay in Miami to come over to Miami Beach, now you got like a 5-hour traffic jam to get over there. Like there's other ways that we can do this to make things better for people that really want to just learn. And so I love the ethos of the guys at the Atlanta Blockchain Center who they want to make it a top 10 hub here in the next couple of years. And I said, why not top 5? Why not top 5? Let's shoot big. And if we shoot for 5 and we make it to 10, guess what? We met the ultimate goal. That was your goal, but let's shoot a little bit bigger. They loved it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I like is the love that you have for your community. You're meeting them. Is it tomorrow? You're getting a get together with.
Tonight.
Oh, tonight. Okay. Yeah. Is that what you guys doing? And who's
So
invited?
this is the inaugural last Friday of the month pizza and crypto meetup. So back in the day, again, I told you earlier in the show when, me and my buddy were first getting into crypto, you could go to a brewery or you could go somewhere and there'd be a group of guys and it was just all dudes hanging out, maybe having a couple beers or, in Austin, there was a lot of places with tacos. And so you just hang around. And so there was a lot of like I call them the old school crypto meetups where there's no shills, there's no pitch decks, there's no nothing. It's just a bunch of people standing around or sitting around at a table, drinking a beer, water, wine, whatever, and having a pizza and just talking crypto. And so tonight from 7 to 9 p.m., it's just that. It's old school. It's family friendly. I'm bringing my wife and my daughter, and I've encouraged everybody to bring their family. I think some people are bringing their dogs. It's just we're doing it old school style. Let's just we're about ready to push into this mass adoption phase, and the more collaboration and connections that I can make only help my network and help other people hopefully get into this space in the right way. And I think when you say that community means a lot to me, like unequivocally, it is one of the most important things to me because without your community, you are nothing. And I know that I've got bigger goals than to just be a YouTube guy. Like at some point, the camera is not where it is for me, but what I have been thinking about is like, being an NFT founder, right? Like start a collection. And this way, it's a good way to actually formalize your community and give them some fun utility. And this way, The biggest problem that we see in this space is the rugs, right? And it's people who get tired and want to move on to something else. But like I've already proven that I've got staying power. Like I'm here because I want to be here. I'm here because I love this space, and I'm here because I love to connect to people. And so, like, why don't we do something where it's I know it's going to have some kind of pizza theme to it. Like I know this unequivocally. So like let's just have some fun with it, and like let's just formalize this. And this can be my forever resting place within crypto as being a founder, and I'm a-okay with that. And some people say like, don't do it, but that's what I want. I want that's what gives me purpose. Like I'm about ready to shift over my content instead of doing 2 1-hour shows a day to 1 6-hour block of content, make like a radio style, right? Like again, that's what I went to school for. That's what I understand. I am all about kind of having the flow, and this allows me to condense everything into a day and collaborate with more people. And when I talk about community, again, my show at 9 a.m. Eastern is 6 a.m. on the West Coast. And again, there's a lot of people that participate and want to collaborate, but that's way too early. And so now, if I can shift some of these conversations to later parts of the day while I'm doing my flow and get them to collaborate and participate, now it's not just me talking to an audience. Now it's our community coming together, group think, and I think there is nothing better. That's what Web3 is. It's unparalleled access to have these groups come together and just collaborate.
And one thing that I like about your shows is it's all about the charts. It's not about, oh, I've got a feeling about this or I've got a feeling about that. It's like, no, this is what the charts say. This is the chart data, and this is, probabilities, etc. So that's one thing that I really enjoy when I watch your shows. Tell me more about how you got. Can I just do that again? I'm so sorry. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say I like the way you do your charts.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm not your typical when you look at an analyst and when you look at you can say all these things and you look all these. I use some different indicators. I use experience, time in the market is one of those things that it is so true and so valid. And when you understand the ebbs and the flows, and when you can use specific indicators and you can understand where we are in the market with sentiment, that's when you can really start to be your best, when you start to add the tools on. Not, I told you earlier on when, when I was just trading, it was blind luck. Like I was just green. I was just getting started. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut, you know what I mean? And like, I tell you, like I made a $30,000 trade on an airplane to Vegas. That was all luck because I probably should have gotten liquidated, because you shouldn't ever leave a trade unattended. But
Mhm. That's brilliant, JChains. Thank you so much for coming on and telling us your crypto journey, your crypto story. It was very, very interesting, and it was very inspiring. A lot of things have happened to you, and I'm so glad that you're in a good place now.
thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This was cool. And I would love at some point to return the favor and have you come on my show.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you.